Committee, Thursday, October 11th. Roll call, Ms. Kathy.
Yes, sir. Mr. Engelhardt?
Here.
President Barris?
Here.
Mr. Gidry?
Here.
Mr. Landry?
Here.
Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. White? Chairman Scott?
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Before we move any further, I'd please ask everyone in the audience to silence all electronic devices. And if you would like to speak tonight on the subject at hand, please fill out a blue slip and get it to Miss Jessica before we get to that comment period. That comment period would be directly after our presentation. So please get those slips up front if you would like to speak. So we need to figure out what kind of time we're going to allow. So we would like those slips up front as soon as possible, please. With that, we will now move to item number 3, presentation by staff of findings and recommendations from Stormwater Management in Calcasieu Parish 2.0, a study of parish-wide drainage maintenance commissioned by the police jury. Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on March the 1st of this year, the police jury affirmed the last phase of staff going forward with the last phase of the drainage management study, which actually started way back in 2014, approved by you in 2015, actually. As a refresher, I'll go through what exactly this entails. Alberto Galan has been the point man on this. I assigned this whole effort to him at the beginning of this, and I want to commend him. He's done an excellent job. Many staff were involved in this. The districts were visited regularly. This is a thorough study. I will say, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your patience in the committees. We took longer than we thought, but I think you'll find it was well worth it, but we want to hear from you. But tonight, let me just do a refresher of what tasks were done in this phase, and then Alberto will come up and he has a presentation that covers the report that is in front of you. The first item was to update the profile of the current gravity drainage district system. Also to review drainage district operations in various areas such as finance, human resources, risk management, and operations. To review the drainage district structure in Calcasieu Parish. And to make recommendations on how the management of drainage can be improved at the district level. And with that, I will ask Alberto to come up and go through his presentation. I appreciate you listening.
Alberto Galan, Office of the Administrator, and I'll be presenting the Drainage Study 2.0 report, summary, and path forward. Got a few goals for this presentation. Mainly it's just to provide an overview of the study contents and also the recommendations, but there's a lot of information that precedes it that kind of got us to that point. I want to start out by saying that no formal action on the study is being, or the recommendations are being requested at this time. We'd like to allow time for the districts, elected officials, and others some time to review the information that's in the study and have discussions, whether individually or in a group setting, however that they would prefer, prior to any formal action by the committee or the jury. So I'll cover a timeline of what that might look like later on, but I want to also say that a copy of the study, as well as this presentation, including the exhibits, will be available online on the police jury's website in its entirety so that anyone can get online and review the information. Brian gave a little bit of the background, which back on May 7, 2015, so that's a few years ago, you adopted what we've shown this brochure about a million times, and I'm happy to say that we've got a lot of check marks here, so a lot of progress has been made in accomplishing the overall mission. So I'm able to look back and see and utilize that information as well in this study. A lot has been accomplished, but the focus here is the operational assessment. So you've seen this graphic before as well. The only difference is that the red circle is no longer around the orange part, which was the development ordinances. It is now on the maintenance part. As you can see, managing stormwater and drainage is very complex, but it all works together. Improvements in any one area help the other. The lateral maintenance system, which is the primary responsibility of the districts, as well as the roadside ditch system, which is the responsibility of the police jury, all interact, and both were reviewed, and both of those are contained in the study as well. I think we need to look internally as well to ensure that we're moving ahead as an organization. We also want to make sure that we're looking at it comprehensively, not just one piece, but we want to make sure that everything is looked at. So what this study is focused on, Brian mentioned that earlier this year is when you authorized this phase of study, is we look at the general updated profile of the current system. We review the gravity drainage district's structures and maintenance operations, as well as have internal administrative review in terms of finance, human resource, risk management, legal, and others. At the end, we hope to make recommendations on how the management of drainage can be improved parish-wide and at the district level. So, what is creating the need for review? I think we all know we're growing tremendously. We're leading the state and the nation in many areas of growth and economic development year after year consistently. This has provided a lot of benefits like jobs, business opportunities, local investments in educational institutions, among others. What it comes with urbanization, and it continues here in Calcasieu Parish and is projected to continue for years to come. We're flooding more than ever. Everyone sees that, and everyone calls for improvements to drainage. With all of this growth and with all of this urbanization comes more demand and strain on public infrastructure, especially drainage. So what has the police jury done so far? I'm going to focus on these three items. At first, ordinances, capital investment, and comprehensive watershed planning efforts. In terms of the development ordinances, this was a very long and arduous process. A lot of people were involved, a lot of input was gathered, but we feel that the updates to the development ordinances have set us up for better growth with drainage at the forefront of consideration. We can't stop there, though, and hope to succeed in overall parish-wide improvement. We have to look at ourselves as public entities to improve this vital service delivery to the general public. Capital investment. Police jury has made drainage a priority as well, and it should be. $17.5 million was approved for 2018 in the police jury's budget. That is no small number. Also, this won't be a one-time investment, but an ongoing effort to implement and upgrade infrastructure projects and processes parish-wide. Examples of these can be as simple as culvert improvements, can be an increased roadside ditch maintenance, regional detention facilities, and other projects that will result in better drainage. How do we determine all that? When we look at comprehensive watershed planning, it involves a lot. It's very complex. This piece isn't focused on, I believe, as much as it should be, or at least not highlighted. It's proactive in so many ways, and it shows the police jury's commitment to long-term watershed management. This is a testament to the police jury and the staff who have worked for years and had the foresight and persistence to invest, draw down some federal dollars, and set up a system, set up data and technologies over many years that we're fortunate enough to have here locally at the parish level. But what does all that technology and terminology and acronyms actually mean and translate to the general public's benefit? What it allows us to do is to plan, recommend, and implement projects and make operational decisions and know in advance that it will provide the most bang for the taxpayers' dollars. We are able to identify some problems and some problem areas that exist in our current drainage system that we were not able to identify as easily before. We're even able to identify some of those issues in real time as a storm event is occurring, and our staff can go out there and sometimes fix it as the storm is going on. We have staff dedicated to this day in and day out to make operations and maintenance more efficient and to plan for long-term improvements. We were the first parish in the state that has been able to initiate the development of flood forecasting and modeling of the Contraband Bayou with the idea of expanding these modeling to all of the watersheds in Calcasieu Parish, and I'll explain why that is very important in a minute. I'd venture to say that most other areas in this state could not even do this even if they wanted to and they had the money to do it, because it takes years and years of developing the infrastructure and systems and rain gauge systems to be able to even get to that next level, and we're there. So this means that resources can and should be used by everyone charged with managing drainage in order to make the best decisions for the residents of Calcasieu Parish. I have to emphasize, though, that coordination and decision-making based on watersheds is not being adequately prioritized. not because the folks charged with doing it don't want to, or because we don't want to. It's because the current system that it's in place limits the ability to be able to accomplish that, can make it impractical to do so, in a lot of ways makes it not legally able to do that. And I'll explain that a little further in a minute. I use this slide here, this is not our image. This is a presentation used by Deltares USA, who is one of the consultants working on our watershed master planning effort. And if you'll notice, there's 3 stars in the United States. We are one of very few using the advanced methodology in decision-making and long-term planning, not just in the state, because we're the only one, but in the country. If you'll notice, that star right in the middle, that's not Houston, Texas. That is Calcasieu Parish. And the other 2 are the Miami metro area and the San Francisco metro area. So you can imagine how much we are committed to making this work. So I've said watershed a few times, and this is a critical component. This is a big why change section of the study. What you see here is a map of the 10 watersheds that exist in Calcasieu Parish. The blue lines generally represent the system of laterals that exist within those watersheds. So these watersheds, in completely oversimplified terms, function as a sort of bowl, a natural bowl that guides the way water drains. What happens in one part of the watershed can have impacts on the other portions of the watershed, regardless of political boundaries. Another key component is that urbanization has impacts on this as well. The more this bowl is filled up, the less the ability that water has to drain out of these watersheds in an efficient manner. These are the boundaries that water adheres to. Taking a watershed approach to making decisions on operations, maintenance, and long-term planning, especially now in the day when we're experiencing such urbanization, is critical because, again, that is what water recognizes. So why is this so critical for us to start here when we look at the direction of the study? This is the map of the same watersheds. As you see, all those, the colored areas are the different watersheds that exist in the parish. The black lines represent the political boundaries that exist in this parish. As you can see, they're not consistent with watersheds, and all but one district is tasked with managing a portion of multiple watersheds. So, taking what I mentioned earlier about how watersheds works, what happens in that Chute Peak Bayou area, for example, the area shaded in yellow, what happens in the northwest portion of that watershed has impacts on the rest of that watershed. And if you'll notice, there are 3 different districts charged with maintaining that. This seems to be an unreasonable approach based on how we know that water drains. Historically, watershed-based approach has not been taken, not because districts or others do not want to, but because we're limited by the political boundaries and in many ways the resources that exist. We're also legally limited as to what you can do outside of those boundaries, even if it affects a watershed that is largely within a district. So how does urbanization fit into that puzzle? This is a map of growth and urbanization in Calcasieu Parish. What you see on the left is 1990. What you see on the right is 2010. It's hard to tell specifically here, but the blue is increased urbanization. The red and the pink, and as we get more red, it indicates more density within those urbanized areas. We can get a closer look at these. We can do this across the parish. Keep in mind that this is 1990 and 2010. In 2020, we will be able to update this to show where more urbanization is occurring between 1990 and 2020 or 2010 and 2020. What you see here is an image of the same area. On the left is the Chute Peak Bayou area in 1990, and on the right is the Chute Peak Bayou area in 2010. As you can see, urbanization has occurred at a rapid rate in this area, and that contributes to the impacts on the overall drainage section. I'm going to scroll through these kind of quickly, but this is happening parish-wide. This is the unincorporated area west of Vinton. Again, the blue represents more urbanization happening outside of that same area. Ward 1, we know, has urbanized at a rapid rate. And keep in mind, this is 2010, and we know that, I don't think anybody would contest that between 2010 and 2018, Ward 1 in particular has experienced significant urbanization. Homewood area, what would seem to be little to no urbanization in 1990 has expanded rapidly. South Lake Charles area, we know some of the biggest drainage problems in South Lake Charles. And again, urbanization contributes to the ability for these watersheds to absorb this water and for the system to be able to handle it. Even in fully urbanized areas, Lake Charles proper, along Sallier Street, you'll notice that it's already urbanized, but the density within that urbanized area has increased significantly. North Sulphur area, you can see that urbanization is occurring across political boundaries within different watersheds, and it's important to consider watersheds when making operational and maintenance decisions, as well as long-term planning and projects. So I ran through that quickly, but after all of that is taken into consideration, we have to look and determine whether there's a better way to manage drainage in our parish, and this is why we're here. Primary focus in this phase of study is the management of the drainage lateral system. We also had a review and made recommendations with regards to maintenance practices and administrative practices, and that includes HR, risk management, and finance. So how do we get there? We've been working towards comprehensive improvements to drainage and stormwater management as we've been talking about for years. So we've been researching best practices for watershed management, and watershed-based approach is nothing new. This has been around for a long time. We looked internally at our own police jury operations and approach to drainage. From the beginning, we used a team across several departments, put a lot of heads together, put some folks that are experts in HR or experts in finance, experts in planning, experts in engineering, to really try and get a comprehensive look of how we can improve. We use the technology that we have here that many other areas aren't fortunate to have, and we gather data from the districts who are more than willing to provide it, and we hope that the recommendations include some considerations based on those discussions. So before we get into the findings and the recommendations, what does generally effective drainage management look like? Again, the report goes into much greater detail as to what that looks like, and includes the best practices and approaches. And some of those include efficient use of resources, long-term planning based on watersheds, consistencies in operations and administrative practices. But the biggest thing is that effective drainage maintenance has a watershed-based approach, not a political boundary-based approach. And it looks at the big picture because it all works together as one system, especially within each individual watershed. So we've covered a lot of material so far in a very short amount of time, but I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible. Based on our work and based on our study so far, and with your support and patience, because I know this took a little bit longer than anticipated, this is what we found. When we look at the current drainage maintenance system, and again, this is a broad overview, not all the findings are consistent among all districts, which made this a challenge, made this take a little bit longer. But when we look at the overall current system, political boundaries that date back to the 80s have historically and in large part been a primary consideration versus watershed boundaries when making decisions. Since then, best practices and approaches have changed what we know, how much we know, and things have changed since then. As shown earlier, the political boundaries are inconsistent with the watershed boundaries, which makes it a challenge to manage and look at the big picture right out the gate for these districts and for the parish as a whole. It's critical now more than ever when you talk about urbanization and the rapid growth that we will continue to experience to consider whether we're doing the best that we can with our drainage system. So let's look individually at these different areas. When we talk about finance, there's a lack of responsible and consistent investment of public dollars. There's a lack of timely and high-level financial reporting and board records. That is needed. Consistent compliance with public laws and regulation is necessary. That applies to us and all public entities. A lot of that is a result of the system, and a lot of that is a result of the disparity in financial resources that exists within the current system. So I want to thank Tammy Buffkin, our finance director, for leading the review and recommendations for this portion. But we would recommend that all districts utilize the police jury for their financial services and financial reporting to be conducted by our finance division. Currently, 3 of the 7 districts are already doing this. What we feel this will do is that it'll increase the ability to invest public dollars. It'll increase interest earnings. We'll have consistent, timely, and compliant financial and audit reporting. And overall, we'll have a decrease in administrative expenses by utilizing this service. When we look at human resources, there's just an outdated human resources policies and manuals that exist today. Again, not all these apply to all districts, but the inconsistencies alone create potential liabilities and issues with state and federal compliance that apply to all public entities. These can include drug screening policies and practices, DOT regulations, workers' compensation policies and practices, and these are very important. So I want to thank Christina Joyce Wilson, our HR director, for leading the review and recommendation of this part. So we would recommend specifically for human resources that we essentially work with all the districts to update, adopt, and apply up-to-date HR policies at the district level. We would want to work towards that, and we believe that we can do that. We would also recommend that all districts utilize our HR department for human resources services to ensure compliance through up-to-date policies. This doesn't mean that the police jury decides who to hire, when to hire, and decides individual district personnel issues. This is more to facilitate the technical assistance, ensure compliance, and ensure up-to-date policies are developed. When we look at risk management, there's a similarity with human resources in terms of the outdated policies and manuals and safety practices in some areas. The existing policies and practices are not in compliance with state and federal regulations. Drug screening and accident procedures, post-accident procedures are an example of that. But a biggie is that some insurance coverages are insufficient to protect public assets, and that's very important to ensure that we protect our public assets. So I want to thank Laura Bolton, Risk Management Director, for leading the review and recommendations for this area. But the recommendation is to utilize the same broker as the police jury for all lines of coverage to hopefully end up with consistent insurance coverages. We would also recommend an update and obtain insurance coverages that adequately protect public assets. And we recommend that we work with the districts to update and adopt risk management policies, including workers' comp, drug testing policies, post-accident procedures, and safety. This is a general safety issue when it comes to risk management, both for the assets, but for also the employees, as well as the general public as a whole when we talk about risk management and safety. So what do we find in the operations and maintenance practices? What we found, and this is general, and a lot more detail is in the study, but we found that the rules of the game have changed significantly regarding watershed management over time since the 1980s when the political boundaries were established. These political boundaries are creating significant limits to our ability to adjust and account for best practices, and also account for rapid urbanization and long-term planning for the overall betterment of the system. In addition, all the rules apply to all 7 districts, regardless of the amount of resources available to each, and that's a challenge for some. I'll use myself as an example here. I would consider myself decent in administrative matters, and I enjoy it, which is a surprise to a lot of people. But if you ask me to handle my current job duties, in addition to identifying and prioritizing projects, in addition to identifying a cost benefit, in addition to working to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations, dealing with the Corps of Engineers and permitting, in addition to managing the day-to-day and long-term planning of multiple watersheds within one political boundary, and at the end of the day, being asked to operate equipment to handle the clearing of debris from a drainage lateral, it just would not be feasible or reasonable to expect that of me, and the same applies to a lot of these. So flip that around, and that's what a lot of the districts have to deal with. And they have to deal with that with not all of the same resources. Some are able to more than others. But again, that disparity creates issues when we talk about everything that watershed management requires in this day and age. Keep in mind that water knows no bounds. So what's done in one district that impacts the overall watershed can certainly impact another district regardless of political boundaries. This is where a new system comes in that is designed to look at the big picture and designed to facilitate and enhance technical assistance to all of these areas that I mentioned, so that that help can be there to ensure better operations and ensure the focus be on the drainage lateral system. We've established the Calcasieu Parish Drainage Coalition. That's great, but it could be more effective under a better lateral maintenance management system. And currently, there's no accountability mechanism. So we can make recommendations and best practices based on all the technology and data that we have here and we utilize here at the police jury level, but there's no way to ensure the ability to implement those best practices and technology and projects at the district level. Again, that has to do a lot with the system that is created that is just not consistent with a watershed-based approach. So in terms of recommendations for operations and maintenance practices, this, I have to thank the entire team, not on this one. Tim, Wes, Alan, Dane, Brian, Jessica, and a lot of folks sitting here that work in Alan's shop, and Teresa and Terry Freelow, and a lot of other folks in Public Works for the help and review the recommendations for this area, as well as provide information that we were able to use within the study. These bullets may seem a little bit general now, but as we look into the overall recommendations package, which I'm going to get to, you'll see how we will propose to make this work. The key focus here is that we create watershed-bounded entities in place of political-bounded entities to accomplish the overall operational objectives and long-term goals for the police jury. We also need to take advantage of all the tools and technology that we're fortunate enough to have here and operate in conjunction with the police jury's watershed master planning. We're all on the same team. We all serve the same people. We just all need to go in the same direction and use everything that we have to tackle this really tough issue in the face of just exploding urbanization. So we've talked about various individual recommendations based on independent subject matters. So let me take a breath, take a sip of water real quick. All right, so this is the final portion of the presentation. And again, we'll have some time at the end for comments, questions, but you know, we'll spend as much time as you need. So the recommendations package for consideration, we're proposing a two-phase approach with the understanding that phase one is a temporary transitional measure as we work towards the implementation of phase two. We recommend that the police jury take formal action, not today, to create two consolidated drainage districts. One consolidated gravity drainage district for all of West Calcasieu Parish, one consolidated gravity drainage district for all of East Calcasieu Parish. We would recommend, per state law, that the parish appoint the maximum 5 commissioners to each of these two consolidated districts. And we also recommend that we follow state law on how those commissioners are appointed, as you can see on that slide, in a staggered approach. Independently, we would also ask the police jury to adopt the recommendations for all of the administrative, management, and operations policies at the district level, including the implementation of policy recommendations as proposed for finance, human resources, risk management, and operations. We also included in this, we feel that it's important to recommend the centralized planning of capital projects and improvements with the departments in conjunction with the Department of Public Works and in alignment with the parish-wide watershed master planning efforts, so that we can all operate in the same direction with the same goals in mind. So phase one of the recommendations package would look like this, and we believe that all of the existing district workforce can accommodate both of these phases. So as you can see, we've got an east side district and a west side district. There's a few more bubbles in phase one than in phase two, and I'll share with you why we think this is a temporary measure to get to phase two. During phase one, each of the original 7 districts' funding streams and their dedications would remain the same during phase one as currently levied. So it doesn't accomplish that big picture approach to efficient use of resources. The district boundaries remain the same during phase one. So again, that doesn't accomplish the watershed focus in place of the political boundary-based focus, because all that would remain under each individual district, but overseen by one consolidated board on both the east side and the west side. All of those 7 district funds would remain within those individual districts under the new consolidated boards. So we've covered a lot here, but are there any questions in phase one before I close out with phase two and the timeline?
Go ahead.
So again, phase one is designed to be a transitional measure to allow parish staff and districts to work together on the operational and administrative recommendations, so we can ensure that when phase two comes up, the new districts can be set up and hit the ground running. That being said, after a 5 to 7 month period of operations as described in phase one, we recommend that each of the consolidated boards call their own tax to place their own millage on the ballot for the spring of 2020, according to each of their boundaries. So one tax for the east side, one tax for the west side. This might turn some heads, and it's not something you hear every day, but based on a lot of input, based on gauging the political climate, and based on looking at the operational efficiencies that can be gleaned from this new system, we would propose that the new millage rates that are recommended be lower than the existing millages currently levied within the territorial boundaries of each existing district. So that would mean that the tax call that would be made by the consolidated board on the east side, we recommend that be lower parish-wide, and on the west side, we recommend that those millages be lower parish-wide, so the public can see that benefit and that we are challenging ourselves to do better drainage. So just to cover briefly what those millages currently look like, and there's a disparity in a lot of these millages for various reasons, but focus on what's circled in yellow for a moment. On the top, you'll see the millages for all of the east side districts, and on the bottom, you'll see the millages for all of the west side districts. And circled in green are the lowest on each side of those, and that is the number that we propose to work from for the new tax call. And again, we would recommend that that be lower parish-wide. So phase two of the recommendations package would look like this. 1 millage for East Calcasieu and 1 millage for West Calcasieu. At this point is when the political boundaries would change to encompass all of it. The Calcasieu River naturally divides the east and the west side, and it divides those watersheds. So it would accomplish that the ability to take a watershed approach to overall drainage management. I also want to say that, again, we believe that all of the existing district workforce can accomplish this transition with the assistance of parish resources as well as parish personnel to assist in updating these things. I have to go back real quick because I forgot to mention a key piece in phase two. In phase two, we would also recommend, because we know that there's going to be an initial funding gap, we recommend that some of that initial funding gap from the reduced millage rates be made up by the police jury for a period of about 3 years as a transitional measure, so that we can secure that lower millage, secure the transition to the new district system, and ensure that that is secure for the general public and everyone involved. So the timeline that we're proposing, and I want to reiterate, we're not asking for any action today. This is just a rollout of the study, and allows us an opportunity to review the study, allows myself and our team to be available to discuss and address any issues over the next coming months as needed before it comes before you for any official action. So as you can see, we're here in October 2018, and this is the Police Jury Drainage Committee where no action is being requested. We would ask that you allow us time in November and December, in particular, some of January, to meet with the gravity drainage districts to review the material, try and address some of the issues, questions, concerns, because we know there are going to be some. We also would like to take that opportunity to get input from the general public, stakeholders, including municipalities, chambers, large landowners, the development community, and others. So that would be prior to phase one, any official action. We would propose that in February of 2019, the Police Jury Drainage Committee meet to take action on the recommendations and for police jury approval for both the consolidated effort as well as the operational and administrative portions, which include that finance, risk management, and human resources piece. At that time, and no police jury action would be needed for this, we would also want to put together a transitional team assembled with representatives from the district staffs and parish staff so that we can develop all of these up-to-date, consistent policies so that, again, we can hit the ground running as quickly as possible. We would then ask that you make that effective in May or June of 2019. And at that point, we would recommend that you appoint 5 board members for each district, as mentioned earlier. And we recommend that each district adopt those policies that are developed and made in the recommendations package here today at their first meeting. We would also recommend that you set the effective date for that time of May and June. And at that point, we would be in phase one if the police jury were to adopt that recommendation in May and June of 2019. So, phase two. Phase two, we would recommend that each consolidated district calls their own tax for their own millage to replace the existing tax structure in the spring of 2020. It would have to be called in November, December of 2019 in order to put that on the ballot in the spring of 2020. And again, we recommended one tax for each side as well. So at this point, I know I covered that probably a little quickly, but again, I really want everybody to take a really close look at what's contained in the study because it provides a lot of information. The exhibits also provide a lot of information and support. The police jury has done a lot to improve drainage parish-wide and made this a priority, and we believe that this phase will take us into the next level for drainage, overall drainage management in our parish. So I'll defer back to Chairman Scott for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Gallant. I think that's a great report. You know, we've all been waiting on it. I have not received any blue slips, so I'll assume that everybody is just digesting. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead. Any blue slips? Anyone like to approach the committee? All right, with that, we'll go to committee members. Mr. Andropon.
I'm not gonna ask any questions. What I'd like to do, I do have some issues that I would like to sit down with you one-on-one, not necessarily issues, that's not a good word to use, but some things that you touched on that I needed probably a little bit more clarification on.
Sure.
If you could call me one day next week when it's convenient for you, so
Sure,
set up
absolutely.
a time and come down eyeball to eyeball and discuss those things.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Only got one comment, and it's an exciting thing, and I don't get excited very often. But when government tells me that I'm gonna get better service for less money, and I'm gonna pay less taxes, that's kind of exciting. And most people will get excited about that. Everybody, we all think we're paying too much now. So when somebody comes along and tells me I'm actually gonna pay less, and the service is gonna get better, that's a good thing. Good job, Roberta.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. President Barris.
Thank you, Chairman. Dana, I had asked to, I wanted to make sure that all the folks here at the districts, they're gonna have a hard copy of this and a hard copy, they're gonna get a hard copy of this presentation as well to leave? Okay. make sure y'all get that. If y'all need anything else from us, we'll be happy. This will be up probably this evening or so, or by tomorrow.
It might already be up on the
It might
website,
already
but
be
by tomorrow for sure, both the presentation and the study, it's up. So
Okay.
they're both up on the
It
parish
is up.
website.
Okay, and you know, Mr. Andrew Pond had, you know, he's got a couple of hot points that he's got, and I have a couple of things that, you know, right off the top of hearing this, you know, I just want to make sure that there's equal representation and plenty of representation on each side. Not too sure about that 5-member per side. It's a lot of area, and just want to make sure that we have everything covered. There's a lot of knowledge from those folks, the board members. You know, I would hate to miss out on that just by cutting a board by 2 people, you know, so we'll get to that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Barris. Mr. McMillan.
We have a good timeline, and if we need to expand the timeline on talking to the public, that's very important. We want their input. We want to make sure that they feel like they understand what we're trying to do here. It's been a long time coming, but I see this as a really positive move for Southwest Louisiana and our drainage opportunities here. So with that being said, the drainage boards, the public in general, the large landowners, we really need to make sure that we're not gonna make any moves till we hear what they have to say, but at some point in time, we will look at trying to see what we could do to come up with a really good plan that's gonna be comprehensive to help our drainage. That's what we're all here to do. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Mr. McMillan. Mr. Guidry.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And Alberto, I know it took some time with staff and with a lot of planning to get a lot of this together tonight, but the one thing that impressed me more so in your presentation tonight was the transparency. And I think that is key in what we do here as a governing body. And I just want to applaud you for that because it's open to the public. We're not trying to do anything to pass anything by anybody. We want it to be open, and we're so glad that you all are here tonight so that what we're giving you guys, we want it to be looked at, studied, and whatever questions you have, please, by all means, bring it back to us. But very key in your presentation. Thank you for that.
With that, I'll end with, once again, I'll just echo Mr. Gallan, the rest of the team. Amazing job, lots of information. But I just want this parish to know that we're being watched by not only the state of how we move forward, but several places throughout the nation. They want to know if we're doing it the right way, how we're getting there, and so we are in the bird's eye. And so congratulations on all the hard work. I think it's going to be a benefit to the future of this parish. I would ask for one thing that we consider, and that would be, you call for a meeting in February. So if we look at November and December and we have enough thought processes that have already been put together, I'd like a short meeting in January where we can kind of air it out one more time before we have the final drainage meeting. So one extra meeting right after the beginning of the year might be conducive to help this out a little bit.
I would put
I
that in
think
the form
that'd be
of a
fine.
motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
I think
We
that would
have
be a good
that. We have a
idea.
motion and a second for an additional meeting in January before our police jury drainage committee meeting in February. Motion, any discussion, any objection? That motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Second, oh yeah, one more. If I need one person from each district to raise your hand, board member, and Miss Jessica's gonna make sure that you get a hard copy of this study.
Well, if there's
And we are
no,
adjourned.
if there's no board member here,
If there's no board member,
Yeah, there is.
let's have the staff come up.
they got Jessica, Alberta, he knows. We'll let Alberta take it.